To my next factoid that I wish to share. I said when I began this series that I really wanted to bring out matters which had just come to my attention in the previous week of my Bible study. And it just so happened that it began with the birth of the Lord Jesus, and it moved naturally into his incarnation and his death and his resurrection. But I don't want this to be too theological, and I just want to bring out some points that have come to my attention in the past few days. So I spent a bit of time this week in Egyptology, that is the study of ancient Egypt. And I want to draw your attention to 2 Kings chapter 19 verse 9, which is almost identical to Isaiah 37 verse 9. And this is what it says: "When he heard say of Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, behold, he is come out to fight against thee, he sent messengers again unto Hezekiah." Now, the context you can look up for yourself. The point I want to draw your attention to is Tirhakah, a king of Ethiopia. Now, Ethiopia is a modern name. The biblical term at that time was Cush, the kingdom of Cush, or the Cushites, and you will come across this in various places. And so that's the sort of old term that was used. Sometimes they called them Nubians. And what it says here is Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia. The actual Hebrew is Cush, and Cush means black, because they were dark-skinned in Ethiopia there, which is just to the south of Egypt, or the modern terms are Sudan, etc., etc. So you would travel up the Nile to reach what they called Upper Egypt. Although you're going up the Nile, it's going down the map. So Upper Egypt is actually to the south end rather than the north end, and you've got to get these kind of ideas in your head. So it says here Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, and this is his only reference here in the Bible, but it's also his only reference in many places until they learned to read the hieroglyphs in Egypt. And it was only in the early 1800s that they were able to do this by studying the Rosetta Stone, which was discovered by Napoleon's soldiers when they invaded Egypt. It took them a couple of decades to understand the hieroglyphs, but what I'm interested in here is Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia. He was the king of the Cushites. And what was interesting about him is he was a black king, and he was actually so powerful and so well known that he actually ruled Egypt as well. This is one of those rare circumstances where the Cushites in the south had so invaded Egypt that they were actually the Pharaohs of Egypt. So when it says here Tirhakah, king of Ethiopia, he's actually also the king of Egypt. And these black pharaohs, as they were called, ruled for a short time until the Egyptians got back on top of them and got rid of them. But what people don't realize is the Cushite kingdom was actually a very, very extensive and lasted a long time. In actual fact, it was in its full heyday when the Greek and the Roman empires were just beginning and rising up. And indeed, they were still there when the Romans declined. So that this is a feature that's not so well known, and is only being recovered by archaeological studies as to what is actually happening way up at the far end of the Nile. So I thought you might be interested in just knowing that little factoid, just something added in The Bible, of course, records lots of things that people didn't think, these skeptics didn't think were actually true. There are several examples. For instance, Sargon in Isaiah 20, verse 1. Let me just confirm that. I'm pretty sure that's right. Argon is Isaiah, yes, Sargon, the king of Assyria. Before we had the archaeologists at work, people didn't think this man existed. The skeptics and the biblical critics, there's a lot of them around the place, didn't think this man existed. Well, the facts are we now know more about him than almost any king in the Bible, because his library was discovered. But let's not go sideways in that. Let's just stick to the king of Cush, who was a very powerful king whose reputation was very great, and that's really why it's mentioned here. When he heard that the king of Cush was coming, that business was, something was happening. So we'll leave you with these thoughts. There's much more to be said, but I want these to be short and snappy.